3 years ago, I made a phone call that I will never stop replaying in my mind. Not because of what was said, because of what I said back. My patient, I'll call her Dorothy, called my office at 6:47 in the morning. She wasn't a dramatic woman. 72 years old, retired school teacher, meticulous about her health. She called my personal line, which she had never done before in 4 years of being my patient. She said she felt strange. Not sick, exactly. Strange. Her chest felt tight in a way she couldn't describe. She was a little short of breath. She had already been up for about an hour, done her usual morning routine, and now something felt off. I was between patients. I had a full schedule. And I told her, a cardiologist with 21 years of experience told her, that it was probably anxiety. That morning tightness in older women is almost always musculoskeletal. That she should take some deep breaths, eat a light breakfast, and call back if it got worse. She didn't call back. Her neighbor found her on the kitchen floor 2 hours later. Dorothy survived. After 4 days in intensive care and a long recovery, she came home. But she came home differently than she left. And I have carried the weight of that morning phone call every single day since. Because when I finally reviewed everything that happened, her symptoms, her timeline, what she had done that morning, I realized something that should have been obvious to me as a cardiologist and wasn't. Dorothy's heart didn't fail her that morning because of her age. It didn't fail her because of her cholesterol or her blood pressure or any of the numbers we had been carefully monitoring for years. It failed her because of what she did in the first 60 minutes after she woke up. And when I started looking, really looking, at the research on cardiovascular events in the early morning hours, I found something that the medical community has largely failed to communicate to the millions of people who need to hear it most. The hour after waking up is the most dangerous hour of the day for the human heart. And there are specific behaviors, ordinary, seemingly harmless behaviors that millions of people over 60 perform every single morning that turn that dangerous hour into a potentially lethal one. I'm going to tell you exactly what those behaviors are. I'm going to explain the biology behind why they're dangerous in a way that will make complete sense to you. And I'm going to give you a simple, practical protocol, one that takes less than 5 minutes, that can meaningfully reduce your risk every single morning for the rest of your life. But first, I need you to understand something about your body that most doctors never take the time to explain. When you wake up, your body does not gently transition from sleep to wakefulness the way a computer comes out of sleep mode, gradually, quietly, systematically. What actually happens is closer to a controlled explosion. Your brain detects the shift from deep sleep and immediately signals your adrenal glands to release a surge of cortisol, your primary stress hormone. Within 15 minutes of waking, your cortisol level rises by 50 to 60%. Not gradually, sharply, like a spike on a graph. Simultaneously, your autonomic nervous system shifts from parasympathetic dominance, the rest and recovery mode that governed your body during sleep, to sympathetic dominance, your fight or flight system. Adrenaline floods your bloodstream. Your heart rate climbs. Your blood vessels constrict. Your blood pressure rises by 10 to 20 points in a matter of minutes. And on top of all of this, after 7 or 8 hours without drinking anything, you wake up in a state of meaningful dehydration. Your blood volume has decreased overnight, but the concentration of red blood cells, platelets, and clotting proteins has stayed the same. The result is blood that is thicker, stickier, and dramatically more prone to forming the clots that cause heart attacks and strokes. This is the cardiovascular environment your heart faces every single morning before you have done a single thing. This is the baseline. And for a heart that has been beating for 60, 70, or 80 years, a heart connected to arteries that are naturally less elastic with age, a heart that may be silently managing early coronary disease that has never produced a symptom, this baseline is already a significant physiological challenge. Now add to that baseline the behaviors I'm about to describe, and you will understand exactly why the early morning hours account for the highest rate of heart attacks, strokes, and sudden cardiac deaths of any period in the entire 24-hour day. Not the afternoon, not the evening, the morning, every single day. The first dangerous morning behavior is one that almost everyone considers a sign of discipline and productivity. Getting out of bed the moment the alarm sounds and standing up immediately. You hear the alarm, you open your eyes, And in one continuous motion, you swing your legs over the side of the bed and stand up. It feels efficient. It feels like what capable, energetic people do. The idea of lying in bed for even 30 extra seconds feels like laziness. But here is what happens inside your body in that moment. After 8 hours of lying flat, your blood is distributed evenly throughout your body. Gravity is not pulling it preferentially in any direction. It is in a state of cardiovascular equilibrium. The second you stand upright, gravity immediately pulls a significant volume of blood, in some studies close to a liter, downward into the veins of your legs and abdomen. Your heart suddenly has substantially less blood returning to it. Your brain, which cannot store oxygen and requires continuous delivery, begins receiving less blood flow within seconds. In younger people, specialized pressure receptors in the major blood vessels, called baroreceptors, detect this drop instantly and signal the heart to compensate by beating faster. The adjustment is so rapid that most young people never notice it happening. But with age, these baroreceptors become slower and less sensitive. There is a lag, sometimes 5, 10, even 15 seconds, between the drop in blood pressure and the compensatory response. During that lag, the brain is not getting enough blood. This is why you feel dizzy when you stand up too quickly. This is why your vision blurs, or you see spots, or your legs feel suddenly weak. This is orthostatic hypotension, and in people over 60, it is extremely common, frequently undiagnosed, and genuinely dangerous. The fall risk alone is serious. Falls are among the leading causes of death in older adults. Hip fractures, head injuries, internal bleeding. Many of them happen in the bedroom, in the first minutes after waking, when someone stood up too quickly and their blood pressure couldn't keep pace. But the more insidious danger is what happens next. When your baroreceptors finally register the blood pressure drop, your nervous system does not respond with subtlety. It panics. It releases a compensatory surge of adrenaline that can overcorrect dramatically, sending your blood pressure spiking upward just as rapidly as it fell. Your heart, which moments ago was not receiving enough blood, is now being driven to beat faster and harder against suddenly elevated resistance. This rapid oscillation, from low pressure to high pressure, from slow heart rate to fast, is exactly the kind of cardiovascular instability that can trigger dangerous arrhythmias in an aging heart. The correction is almost embarrassingly simple. When your alarm goes off, stay horizontal for 30 to 60 seconds. Breathe. Let your nervous system acknowledge that there is no emergency. Then sit up slowly and remain seated on the edge of the bed, feet on the floor, for another 60 seconds. Move your ankles in slow circles. This activates the muscle pumps in your calves that help push blood back upward toward your heart before you stand. Only then rise, slowly, with one hand on a stable surface if needed. 2 minutes. That is the entire intervention. 2 minutes that change the cardiovascular trajectory of your entire morning. The second dangerous morning behavior is one that is so universal it is practically invisible. Not drinking water immediately upon waking. Think about what you actually do first. Most people reach for their phone. Many go directly to the coffee maker. Some go to the bathroom. Almost no one goes immediately to the kitchen for a glass of water. And yet, after 7 to 8 hours of continuous fluid loss through breathing and perspiration, processes that continue throughout sleep regardless of how still you are, your body wakes up in a state of genuine dehydration. The cardiovascular consequence of this dehydration is something called hemoconcentration. Your blood volume is reduced, but the cellular and protein components of your blood, the red blood cells, platelets, and clotting factors, remain at their full concentration. The result is blood that is measurably thicker and stickier than it should be, blood that requires significantly more pressure to pump through your arteries, and blood in which platelets are far more prone to aggregating and forming clots. This is not a theoretical risk. It is a documented biological mechanism that maps directly onto a well-established epidemiological finding. Heart attacks are 40% more likely to occur in the morning hours than at any other time of day. Strokes are nearly 50% more likely. The timing is not coincidental. It reflects the convergence of elevated cortisol, rising adrenaline, increased blood pressure, and maximally hemoconcentrated blood, all happening simultaneously in the first hours after waking. If you have any degree of atherosclerotic plaque in your coronary arteries, and the majority of adults over 60 have some degree of it, whether or not it has produced symptoms, that sticky, thickened morning blood is interacting with that plaque at precisely the moment when the physiological environment is most favorable for a clot to form and grow until it blocks the artery entirely. The solution requires less than 30 seconds. A glass of water on your nightstand, consumed before anything else, before the phone, before the coffee, before the bathroom if it is safe to do so. 300 to 400 milliliters of room temperature water. Not ice cold for reasons I will explain momentarily. Room temperature. This single habit begins reversing hemoconcentration within minutes, reduces platelet stickiness, lowers the mechanical workload on your heart, and materially changes the clotting risk profile of your blood before you have taken a single step. Dorothy had not had any water the morning she collapsed. She had been up for over an hour. She had made coffee. She had moved around the house. She had done everything that seemed normal, and her blood, thick and dehydrated from a full night's sleep, was circulating under elevated pressure through coronary arteries that were not equipped to handle what happened next. The third dangerous morning behavior is one that is specifically relevant to a growing number of older adults who have been persuaded by wellness content online that they are doing something extraordinarily beneficial for their health. Immediate exposure to extreme cold after waking, cold showers, cold plunges, or any form of intense cold application to the body in the first hour of the day. The research on cold exposure for healthy young adults suggests some legitimate benefits: improved alertness, modest metabolic effects, potential mood enhancement. And the social media content promoting these practices is compelling, abundant, and almost entirely produced by people in their 20s and 30s with cardiovascular systems that are physiologically capable of tolerating the acute stress involved. For adults over 60, the risk calculation is categorically different. Here is the biology. When cold water, particularly cold water directed at the torso, contacts the skin, the body interprets it as an immediate survival threat. Within seconds, your nervous system activates a response called peripheral vasoconstriction. Thousands of small blood vessels in the skin and extremities constrict simultaneously, redirecting blood flow toward the core to protect vital organ temperature. This is not a gradual process. It happens abruptly, like thousands of valves closing at once. The cardiovascular consequence of this mass vasoconstriction is an instantaneous and dramatic spike in blood pressure. Peer-reviewed studies document systolic blood pressure increases of 20 to 40 points from cold water immersion. In individuals with already elevated baseline pressure or with compromised vascular elasticity from age and atherosclerosis, the spikes can be considerably larger. Simultaneously, the heart is forced to beat harder and faster to pump blood through a circulatory system that has suddenly become far more resistant. Thousands of constricted vessels creating back pressure that the heart must overcome with every beat. For a cardiovascular system that is already operating under the morning's elevated cortisol, thickened blood, and autonomic stress, this additional shock can push an aging heart past the threshold of safe function. The oxygen demand imposed on the heart muscle can exceed what the coronary arteries are capable of supplying, especially if there is any underlying coronary disease, which is present in a large proportion of adults over 60 who have never had a cardiac event and have no idea it is there. When the heart muscle cannot get enough oxygen, the electrical system that governs its rhythm becomes unstable. Arrhythmias develop. In the worst cases, ventricular fibrillation and cardiac arrest. Dorothy had begun taking cold showers 3 months before her collapse. She had read about the benefits. She had worked up to 2 full minutes of cold exposure every morning. She felt proud of herself. She thought the cardiovascular discomfort she occasionally felt, the brief racing heart, the moment of breathlessness, was adaptation. It was not adaptation. It was warning. If you are over 60 and you currently take cold showers or use cold exposure as part of a morning wellness routine, I am not telling you that these practices have no value. I am telling you that the timing and intensity matter enormously, and that the first hour after waking, when your cardiovascular system is already managing its most demanding transition of the day, is precisely the wrong time for an additional acute physiological stressor of this magnitude. If you want to explore cold exposure, do it later in the day when your cardiovascular system has stabilized. Start with cool water, not cold. Direct it to your extremities first, hands, feet, before ever exposing your chest. And if you experience any palpitations, dizziness, chest discomfort, or unusual shortness of breath during cold exposure, stop immediately. These are not signs of adaptation. They are your cardiovascular system telling you that it is in distress. The fourth dangerous morning behavior affects a group of people who believe with complete sincerity that they are doing one of the healthiest things possible: engaging in intense physical exercise within the first hour or two of waking. Exercise is genuinely one of the most powerful cardiovascular protectors available to older adults. The long-term evidence for regular physical activity in reducing heart disease risk, improving cardiac function, and extending healthy lifespan is among the most robust in all of medicine. I am not asking you to stop exercising. I am asking you to think carefully about when. In the early morning, your cardiovascular system is already running near its physiological ceiling for the reasons we have discussed. Blood pressure is at its daily peak. Coronary artery tone is at its highest. Platelet aggregability is elevated. Blood viscosity is increased. And your muscles, having been still for 8 hours, are demanding a sudden and dramatic increase in blood flow the moment you ask them to work at high intensity. For a young cardiovascular system with wide open coronary arteries and highly elastic blood vessels, this is manageable. The system has abundant reserve capacity. For an older cardiovascular system, particularly one with undiagnosed coronary disease, which is extremely common in this age group, the demand that intense early morning exercise places on the heart can exceed safe limits. Oxygen delivery cannot keep pace with oxygen demand. The heart muscle begins to suffer. Arrhythmias develop. Many documented cases of sudden death in older adults during morning exercise occur not in people who were unhealthy or sedentary. They occur in people who exercised regularly, believed they were in good shape, and had no idea they were stacking multiple cardiovascular risk factors in a combination their aging hearts could not withstand. The modification is straightforward. If you prefer morning exercise, wait at least 90 minutes to 2 hours after waking before beginning any activity of meaningful intensity. Hydrate first. Eat something light. Allow your cortisol and adrenaline levels to begin normalizing. Start every session with a genuine warm-up of at least 10 to 15 minutes. Not a perfunctory stretch, but a real, gradual increase in heart rate and blood flow. And consider whether your most intense training sessions might be better placed in mid-morning or early afternoon, when your cardiovascular system is fully awake, well hydrated, and operating with significantly more safety margin. The fifth dangerous morning behavior is the one that most directly connects to Dorothy's collapse, and it is one of the most common behaviors among older adults who are actively trying to take care of their health. Taking multiple medications, particularly cardiovascular medications, on an empty stomach, immediately upon waking, without water, in the middle of the morning physiological storm we have been discussing. I want to be absolutely clear. I am not telling you to stop taking your medications. If your physician has prescribed medications for your blood pressure, your heart, your cholesterol, or any other condition, those prescriptions exist for important reasons and should not be changed without direct consultation with your doctor. This is an educational observation about timing and context, not a prescription. Here is what the research shows. Several classes of cardiovascular medication that are extremely commonly prescribed to adults over 60 have pharmacological profiles that interact meaningfully with the morning physiological environment. ACE inhibitors and ARBs, among the most commonly prescribed blood pressure medications, can cause a drop in blood pressure that, when combined with the orthostatic hypotension of waking and standing, produces a compounded drop that is far larger than either factor alone. Beta blockers slow the heart rate and reduce the force of cardiac contraction, effects that are generally beneficial, but that can interact with the morning cortisol surge in ways that require the heart to work differently than its normal compensatory response assumes. Diuretics taken first thing in the morning without adequate hydration, accelerate the very hemoconcentration that makes the morning hours dangerous, drawing additional fluid from blood that is already thickened from overnight dehydration. Dorothy took 3 cardiovascular medications. She took them every morning within minutes of waking, as instructed. She took them with a small sip of water, not a full glass, and she took them before eating anything. The question of when in the morning to take specific medications and with how much water and in what order relative to food and hydration is one that is worth a direct conversation with your prescribing physician. Not to change your medications, but to optimize the conditions under which they work for you, rather than against the physiology of your most vulnerable morning hours. Now let me give you the morning protocol that I developed after Dorothy's collapse. The same protocol I now share with every patient I see over 60. The same one Dorothy herself has followed for 3 years. It takes 5 minutes. It requires no equipment, and it works directly with your cardiovascular physiology rather than against it. The first minute, when your alarm sounds, stay flat. Do not move toward the edge of the bed. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts, hold gently for 2, exhale through your mouth for 6. Repeat this 5 times. This breathing pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, moderates the cortisol spike, and signals to your cardiovascular system that the transition from sleep to waking is not an emergency. You are not being chased. You are not in danger. Your heart does not need to respond as though you are. The second minute, sit up slowly and move to the edge of the bed. Your feet should be flat on the floor. Do not stand yet. Reach for the glass of water you placed on your nightstand the night before, room temperature, 300 to 400 milliliters, and drink all of it, every drop. You are beginning to reverse overnight hemoconcentration. You are thinning your blood, reducing platelet stickiness, and lowering the mechanical workload on your heart before you have taken a single step. The third minute, remain seated. Rotate your ankles. 10 slow circles in each direction. This activates the venous muscle pumps in your calves and begins pushing blood back toward your heart before you stand, reducing the risk of orthostatic hypotension. Allow your baroreceptors, still sluggish from sleep, to register your new position and begin calibrating. The fourth minute, gentle mobilization while seated, slow neck rotations, shoulder rolls. Reach your arms overhead and hold a gentle stretch. These movements begin warming the muscles that will soon support your weight and your day. They improve blood flow gradually and safely without imposing the acute cardiovascular demand of standing exercise. The fifth minute, stand up, slowly. One hand on a stable surface if you feel any uncertainty. Pause for 10 seconds before moving. Notice your body, any dizziness, any visual disturbance, any unusual sensation. If everything feels stable, begin your morning normally. That is 5 minutes. 5 minutes that address every major cardiovascular vulnerability of the morning transition: the cortisol spike, the orthostatic hypotension risk, the hemoconcentration, the baroreceptor lag, and the abrupt sympathetic activation that makes the first hour after waking the most dangerous cardiovascular period of the day. Dorothy does this every morning now. She told me recently that she does not think of it as a medical protocol. She thinks of it as respect for a heart that has worked without pause for 72 years and deserves a gentle start to each new day, rather than an abrupt demand to perform at full capacity within seconds of consciousness. I think she is right. Before I close, I need to say something directly. If you have experienced any of the symptoms I described today, dizziness upon waking, morning palpitations, unusual chest tightness in the early hours, shortness of breath after minimal activity, please do not simply modify your morning routine and consider the matter addressed. Please contact your physician. These symptoms can represent conditions that require evaluation, not just behavioral adjustment. This video is educational. It is not a substitute for the individualized medical care that only your doctor can provide. What this video is, I hope, is the conversation that prompts you to have that appointment. The information that makes you take those symptoms seriously, rather than attributing them to aging and moving on. The context that turns something you observed about yourself into something you bring to a professional who can investigate it properly. Because that is what Dorothy did not do. She noticed the warning signs for weeks before her collapse. She noticed the tight chest, the unusual fatigue, the mornings that felt harder than they should have. And she attributed them to getting older, to being out of shape, to nothing serious. She almost died from nothing serious. You deserve better information than she had, and so does everyone over 60 in your life. If this video gave you something worth sharing, a protocol to try, a conversation to start, a morning habit to reconsider, share it today with someone you care about. Not because of an algorithm, because the person who needs it most may not find it on their own. Subscribe to this channel. Every week we bring you evidence-based, medically grounded information about the cardiovascular and health decisions that matter most to adults over 60. Information built on research, clinical experience, and the hard-earned understanding that comes from being present at the moments when things go wrong, and learning everything possible about how to make sure they don't. Leave a comment below telling me how many of these morning behaviors you recognized in your own routine, and tell me which step of the 5-minute protocol you will start with tomorrow morning. Your heart has been working for you every second of every day of your entire life. Give it 5 minutes. It has earned them.